There's a quote from Dan Sullivan that explains how you think the more successful you become. Here's the quote. You'll notice that as you go forward, that everything in your future has the qualities of being both more achievable and more measurable than the things you did in the past. That's one thing I've learned over and over and over, coaching highly successful people, but also just watching my own self, is that the more I move forward and the more I achieve in my life, the more my goals are more achievable and more measurable. And the thing I notice about people who haven't made big progress in their life is that their goals are very broad, very unclear, and very non-specific, very non-measurable. Now, as you move forward in your life, you want to have less and less goals. You want to get clearer and clearer on your future self. There's a quote from Robert Brault. Robert Brault said, "We're kept from our goal, not by obstacles, but by a clear path to a lesser goal." We have a lot of lesser goals. If you've got a lot of lesser goals, if you've got 10 goals, then you're not clear. You're not focused on your future self. Even Gino Wickman in his book Traction said that businesses that have more than 3 goals usually don't accomplish very much over a 6-month period of time. A lot of business owners and a lot of people have like 10 goals they're trying to accomplish. And if you're moving your life in that many different directions, it's obvious you don't have a lot of focus. Focus creates movement. Concentration of effort is what creates momentum. You want to have 1, 2, or 3 goals max. No more than 3 goals, and those goals should be highly achievable and highly measurable. It doesn't do you any good to have goals that you're not going to achieve. That's not good for your confidence. It's not good for anything. You want achievable goals and highly measurable goals, highly specific. There's 2 attributes of achievable and measurable goals. One is it's either an event or a number. The event might be that you've actually completed something, like you actually completed writing that book, or you actually completed the marathon in a certain amount of time. So there could be an event, like you actually reached a destination. Maybe you took that vacation. That could be a goal, is that an event actually occurred, or that a number was achieved or reached. So I'll give an example of my big 3 for the next 6 months. This is just for the next 6 months, the last 6 months of 2021. But my big 3 personally are, I'm getting ready to launch my next book, The Gap in the Gain, and I want to sell 200,000 copies of that. That's measurable. It's achievable. It's a huge stretch. Doesn't mean it's not a huge stretch to sell that many copies in a certain amount of time, but it's measurable. It's achievable. It's beyond what I've done in the past. It's going to take courage. It's going to take new and better strategy. But that's a big aspect of hope and motivation. According to Expectancy Theory and according to Hope Theory, in order to have high motivation and high hope, you have to have a clear, measurable outcome that you want, and you need a strategy or a pathway to getting there, or many different workable strategies or pathways. Actually, the more psychologically flexible you are, the more you're willing to try multiple different pathways or strategies to achieving your goal. The third aspect is having a sense of agency or confidence that you can actually find and execute that strategy. So just as an example, there's a great quote that says, "What got you here won't get you there." That's from Dr. Marshall Goldsmith, the performance coach. What got you here won't get you there. Insanity is trying to do the same thing over and over again, but expecting a different result. And that's actually what the research on hope has found. Low hope people are unwilling to find new pathways or strategies to achieving their goals. Instead, they're just going to try the same thing over and over and over again. And if it doesn't work out, they just get upset, they disengage, they distract themselves with social media or something else. Whereas high hope people are highly adaptive, they're flexible, they're willing to find multiple different pathways to getting where they want to go. There's actually a great book on this subject called The Third Door by Alex Banyan. I believe his last name is Banyan. But the whole concept of the third door, and he bases his idea on a nightclub, getting into a nightclub. He says all goals or all success is like a nightclub. There's one door, the main door, and that's where 99% of people go. And there's a huge line, and most people are not going to get in. That's the main way that most people try to achieve things. It's just trying to go through the front door. It might take you forever to get in. You might not get in at all. That's just the common, non-creative way of getting in. The second door is for the VIPs and the celebrities. Most people are not allowed into that door. Well, the thing that Banyan's book's all about is that there always is a third door, and no one tells you about that third door because that third door is not obvious. It may require you to run down a back alley, knock on a door a million times, jump through a kitchen window, sneak in some way. There's always a third door or an alternative pathway, but it takes a lot of creativity, flexibility, and adaptability to find that third door. So the reason I brought all this up is, as it relates to my first goal, 200,000 copies of The Gap in the Gain, I've never done 200,000 copies of a book in a 3 to 6 month period of time. I've done at least half of that before, but what got me here won't get me there. And so I've got to find better strategies, better pathways than what I've done in the past if I want to achieve that goal. And if I'm flexible and if I'm adaptive, I will find better strategies than I've applied in the past, although I can apply some of what I've applied in the past, But if I'm going to achieve something I've never done before, I need to try things I've never done before. And obviously, if I'm going to commit to that outcome, it's going to require high levels of courage on my part, high levels of learning, adaptability, thinking, and hopefully an upgrade in my thinking. There's a great book on this subject actually by Adam Grant. Adam Grant wrote a book called Think Again recently. And in that book, he talks about how as people, we're constantly updating our technology. You get updates on your smartphone, on your iPhone. You get updates to your computer, maybe your car. But people rarely update their belief systems, their thinking systems, their strategy. They even rarely update their identity. One of the things that Grant talks about is that you should not attach your current identity to your past identity, because hopefully you've learned things and hopefully you're not the same person you were in the past. Hopefully you can see things better than you did in the past. Hopefully you've had experiences and you've learned things that your former self simply didn't know. Like 3, 4, 5 years ago, hopefully you're better off. Hopefully you're clear. Hopefully you know things because of your experiences that your former self didn't know. There's a great quote that Adam Grant shares in that book from the billionaire investor Ray Dalio. And the quote is essentially, if you're not embarrassed by who you were 12 months ago, you didn't learn enough. Or if you didn't think that what you were doing 12 months ago was stupid 12 months ago, you didn't learn enough. The idea is, hopefully you're advancing and approaching your goals so fast and learning through failure, learning through feedback, that what you were doing 12 months ago was like 5 years ago or 10 years ago. It's totally outdated. And obviously one of the ways to do that is to be on an aggressive, approach-oriented way. Psychologists have found that you're either approach-oriented or you're avoid-oriented. If you're approach-oriented, that means that you're willing to fail, you're willing to try, you're willing to learn, you're willing to get feedback, you're willing to update your thinking, you're willing to update your strategy. Whereas if you're avoid-oriented, you don't want to deal with that pressure. You don't want to fail. You're worried too much about the risks. You're worried too much about maybe failing. Whereas if you're approach-oriented, you're willing to fail. You want to fail because you know that right now you're wrong and you want to just be less wrong. You want to update your thinking. One of the things that Grant talks about in the book is just the idea of feedback. He gives the example of first graders and of just doing multiple drafts, of even drawing a picture. So there was a group of first graders that drew a picture of a butterfly. And then they got a lot of feedback from their teachers and their peers on how they could improve it. And so the second draft, they applied that feedback, and they ultimately did this over and over and over again and did 4 drafts. And by the 4th draft, it was uncomparable, the butterfly that these kids could draw versus their first draft. But if you think that the first draft is the max of your capability, you're selling yourself short. Through feedback, through learning, through experience, through a few drafts or through a few iterations, it's insane how much you can grow, how much you can change, how much you can improve. Human beings can grow. They can transform, they can improve. Your way of doing things, your way of seeing things can grow and transform and improve compared to your former self. You don't have to do things the way you've always done them. And so as Grant said, you shouldn't attach your current identity to your former self, because if you do, then you lock yourself into thinking you always have to do things the way you've done them, which is not true. You don't have to believe what you used to believe. You don't have to do things the way you used to do things. If you're advancing, if you're upgrading, if you're improving, then you should do things differently than your former self, hopefully better. And your future self will do things differently as well. So here are my big 3 in a nutshell. Launch, gap, and gain. Sell over 200,000 copies by the end of the year. I also want to get 100,000 people on this YouTube channel. That'll be a massive stretch. I'm probably going to have to film about 200 or 300 videos to make that happen. And they've got to be better and better videos, more useful videos. And then I want to get 100,000 people into my free Future Self course. And so actually down below, you can get the link to join that free Future Self course. There's 30 days of free training, all science on how you can imagine and become your desired future self. So I only share my own goals to say they're pretty measurable. They're also pretty achievable, but they're massive stretches. But if I actually achieve those over the next 6 months, it will represent a big leap. There's a great book actually by Gay Hendricks. I recommend this book to everyone. It's called The Big Leap. And really the idea of a big leap is that by accomplishing various outcomes, you've now made a big leap. You're now in a different position than you were before. For example, if I accomplish these 3 outcomes, my life's in a completely different place. I've got different position, different trajectory, different confidence, different mindset, different freedom, different possibility than my current self. It's a big leap. And once you've made that big leap, you're now in a different position. You've got a different identity, a different mindset, a different ability than your former self had. You've got different knowledge, skills, capabilities, but also different freedoms and different potential. So you should definitely consistently be making big leaps every 3 to 6 months. And you clarify that by accomplishing 3 specific outcomes, no more than 3. If you've got more than 3 goals, then you're too spread thin, you're seeking lesser goals, you're too split focused, you're not focused enough, not clear enough, and not concentrated enough to actually get extreme momentum towards your future self. So just back to this quote from Dan Sullivan, and I invite you to think about your own self. You'll notice that as you go forward, that everything you want in your future has the qualities of being both more achievable and more measurable than the things you did in the past. So what are your big three? What are the three outcomes that you're trying to accomplish right now? Or even just the one major outcome you're trying to accomplish right now? Is it achievable and is it measurable? And if you actually accomplish it, will it be a big leap? Will it allow you greater levels of freedom, confidence, situation than your current self? And then also you could apply the same quote to your past, looking back at your own goals. Recently, I was looking at my own lists of goals, and they weren't very measurable, and often they weren't achievable. Sometimes they were so outlandish, they were impossible. I was setting myself up for failure in the beginning, but also I would look at my goals and they were completely disjointed. They weren't clear, they weren't cohesive, and they were all over the place. And so it's fun to look at your old goals and see that they were less achievable, less measurable than your goals are now. And as you continue on, your goals will become increasingly achievable and measurable, which will allow you to make better progress and allow you to consistently build your confidence in situations in the future. So, hope you enjoyed that quote from Dan Sullivan. He's the co-founder of Strategic Coach. He's amazing, an absolute gem of a person. And hopefully you enjoyed this goal. I invite you, now that you've done that, to set your own big three for the next 6 months and to create your own big leap. And to be sure that as you set goals in the future, that they're achievable and measurable, and that you don't set more than 3 for yourself so that you can actually concentrate and make massive progress. According to Pearsons Law, when performance is measured, performance improves. When performance is measured and reported to someone else, the rate of improvement accelerates exponentially. You can know you're serious about something if you're measuring it. For example, if you're measuring your income, you're going to probably improve it. There's a great quote that says, you can't manage something unless you measure it. So if you're not measuring how much you're eating or what you're eating, your eating is probably out of control. If you're not measuring your finances, it's out of control. Whatever you measure, you can improve, but whatever you measure and report improves exponentially. This is why accountability is so powerful. Accountability is one of the most powerful things you can do to improve your life, and you want to actually have daily accountability. And in this video, I'm going to share with you very simply how you can do daily accountability in 2 minutes or less per day. Now, one of the reasons why you want to do this daily is so that you can get some form of feedback. The feedback might just be your own emotions, sharing your progress of how you did. But daily feedback is a flow trigger. Immediate feedback is a flow trigger. And so this is about 2-minute daily accountability. Choose an accountability partner, someone you trust, someone you like, and then choose the method of communication. I have an accountability partner who was a professor of mine, someone I love. We've now gone on to become great friends. We've been accountability partners for like 8 years, and we just text each other. And here's our mode of accountability. At the end of every single day, I shoot him a text and he shoots me a text. The text has 2 components. One is sharing how I did on my big 3 that day. So it could be 0 out of 3, 1 out of 3, 2 out of 3, 3 out of 3. We don't have more than 3 things on our daily to-do list because we try to apply the 80-20 principle to everything we do. The 80-20 principle says that 80% of your results come from 20% of what you do. And if you've got a long to-do list of like 10 things, from my perspective, that's based on poor planning. You're not actually cutting the fat and focused on the few things that matter. If you're focused on the 80-20, then you're focused on the few activities that create the biggest impact. So when you're choosing your big 3, every single day, you want to choose the outcomes that would make the biggest impact so that you're focused on progress and outcomes, not just on busyness. If you're trying to do 10 things a day, then you're focused on busyness. So have no more than 3 things on your to-do list. And so every day, at the end of the day, and it's just literally a 2-minute accountability, I share with my accountability partner, and it's in a single text message, how I did on my big 3. 1 out of 3, 2 out of 3, 3 out of 3. It's just a number. And then from there, I write down in bullets the 3 outcomes I'm going to create tomorrow. That's it. And then he texts his things to me. And then the next day, I do the same thing. I wake up, I get after my big 3. I try to live my best day I can. And then I just shoot him the text again. How I did on my big 3. Maybe I got a 3 out of 3. The cool part about doing this is it's super simple. It's super basic. It creates social bonds. It creates social accountability. It creates a simple system of accountability where you've got daily immediate feedback. It also builds up your confidence over time. It gives you clarity because simply by texting your accountability partner the 3 things you want to accomplish the next day, you've now planned your next day. You can now live with intention the next day. You can then get better and better at choosing better big 3s. The goal is that over time, you're focusing your energy on things that have massive impact, on the few things that create the biggest impact, the 80-20. And so over time, you'll get better and better at identifying the big 3. It's okay if you don't actually hit those big 3. Very rarely do I actually hit 3 out of 3 when I'm sending my accountability partner my text. If I do, that's awesome, and I'm shooting for it, but it's okay if I don't hit it. The point is, was I focused on the important? Was I actually chasing my future self? Was I actually moving forward? Was I being intentional or was I being reactive? By giving yourself big three and by reporting it, again, as Pearsons Law says, when performance is measured, it improves. When performance is measured and reported, the rate of improvement accelerates. When you do this, and if you apply this for a week, a month, a year, you will experience the compound effect of living intentionally, of actually putting the important before the urgent, of getting better and better at choosing the right outcomes and activities for each day. And then you'll spend your mornings better because you're going to wake up and get to work on the things that matter rather than being drowned out by 10 things on your to-do list which don't. You get better and better at living your time in the sweet spot. Instead of having 10 things on your to-do list, you actually delegate or outsource or delete most of them, and you just focus your time on what Gay Hendricks would call the zone of genius in the book, The Big Leap. Your zone of genius is where you're in a flow state. You're doing the activities you want to do. You're actually focused. You're making progress. You're not competing with anyone else. You're in your zone doing what you want, and you're no longer just caught up doing 1,000 things. If you have 10 things on your daily to-do list, that is called a lot of decision fatigue. That's a lot of back and forth switching from task to task to task, rather than 90 minutes of flow here, 90 minutes of flow here, 90 minutes of flow here, focused on massive progress. If you have 10 items on your to-do list, that is a busyness model, not an effectiveness model. You don't want more than 3 things on your daily to-do list. Yes, you will have other things you've got to do. You've got urgencies, but those urgencies don't need to be written on a to-do list. Put the things on your to-do list that matter, which you want to measure and which you want to account. That is how you do simple 2-minute daily accountability. Find someone you like, choose a form of communication, shoot a text reporting your big 3 for the day, and then tell them in bullets what your big 3 are for the next day. Then the next night, do the same thing. Report on your big 3 that you just accomplished, and then 3 for the next day. This allows you to have immediate feedback, which increases flow. It allows you to choose better wins each day. It allows you to measure the things that matter and ultimately get better at choosing better and better things which matter. Getting better at choosing those ways in which you spend your time on higher leverage activities and ultimately making massive progress and massive confidence build. Ray Dalio, the billionaire investor, said that you should really go after insanely audacious goals. You should go for really big goals.
Go after your audacious goals. Think differently.
Because honestly, whatever you focus on expands, and changing your life 1 degree versus changing it 180 degrees requires similar amounts of effort. Any form of change is difficult. Even being average or mediocre is difficult. Whatever you end up going for or investing yourself in, life is going to be hard, so you might as well go for something really, really big. James Cameron, the movie producer who made the Titanic, Avatar, he said you should really set ridiculously high goals, because whether you succeed or fail, even if you fail, your failure will be way beyond most people's successes.
Don't put limitations on yourself. Other people will do that for you. Don't do it to yourself. Don't bet against yourself.
So in a large way, you are whatever you go after. You are whatever you see. And there's a lot of psychological research to back this up. Prospection is the idea that whatever view you hold of your future self is the primary driver of who you're being in the present. Most people have very average goals. Most people are striving for average. They're striving to pay the bills, striving to, just sit and scroll on Facebook and just kick it. Like, their goal is to be average. Most people don't have the goal to be massive. Actually, in the book, The 10X Rule by Grant Cardone, he invites you to take whatever goal you have and then make it 10 times bigger, and then take 10 times more action than you think you should. Dan Sullivan, who's like one of the top entrepreneurial coaches in the world, he argues that it's easier to go 10x than it is to go 2x. And that he even further argues, and I agree with this, that 2x goals, meaning if you're like just trying to double your income, that's actually bad for your brain. And I agree, because when your brain is like a muscle, you want to work it out. You want your brain to work hard. You want your brain to make great connections, new connections, novel connections. And so when you make your goal 10 times bigger, all of a sudden your brain is forced to think through different solutions than it's ever thought about. And it's able to connect different dots than if you're just trying to work harder. It's not about working harder, it's about thinking differently. It's about finding a nonlinear path. So actually going 10 times bigger is easier than going 2 times bigger, because when you go 10 times bigger, first off, it'll force you to get out of all of your old ways of thinking and all of your old habits. And it'll force you to start looking towards pathways or directions that most people aren't even thinking about. And maybe you haven't even thought about. And so it'll lead to non-conventional thinking, non-conventional strategies. Tim Ferriss actually said that big goals are a lot easier than small goals, because the fiercest competition is for small goals. The fiercest competition is for average. Most people are competing for that 9 to 5 position And so, like from an evolutionary standpoint, the most fierce, intense competition is for average. It's for small goals, because most people, they won't elevate their vision of their future self and then find new and unique pathways to creating the life that they want. And so most people are fiercely competing at kind of just the norm levels versus elevating your vision and finding really unique pathways and strategies to getting there. The research on this is really clear. High, hard goals are far more motivating than small goals. Also, there's a lot of research on psychology in the world of, it's called expectancy theory. In order for a goal to be really motivating, number one, it does need to be high, hard, challenging. It needs to have what psychologists call valence, meaning it's very personal, very meaningful to you. You value it, but also it's specific and measurable. There's a good quote from Seth Godin. He said, you see whatever you're measuring. And so I would ask you, actually, what are you actively measuring in your life? You may be measuring like your income. You may be measuring like, I don't know what you're measuring. But what if you 10x your measurements? Then you'd start to see the world differently because you see the world through the lens of your measurement. You create filters to determine what you're measuring. And so if you 10x your measurement, it'll force you to start looking for different pathways or strategies to getting there. That's part of expectancy theory. It's also part of hope theory, that the more specific and measurable the target, the more you can then find workable pathways, strategies, or plans to getting there. And the more you commit 100% to a 10x target, the more you'll be forced to find a really unique, different, nonlinear pathway to getting there. And so that's high adaptability, high pathways thinking, is finding how to get there in the most direct path. And most people are not taking direct paths. And obviously it's never going to be a perfectly direct path, but the more direct you're willing to go, the more courage you're willing to have, the more you're willing to shed old thoughts, old beliefs. It's the idea of firm views loosely held. You want to let go of the old ways that did work and the old ways that didn't work. Low hope people continue doing the same course of action over and over and again and being frustrated that they're not getting different results. Whereas high hope people, they take everything they're learning and use it as feedback to come up with better paths or strategies to their goal because they're committed. That's really what deliberate practice is. And that's how you upgrade your brain. Actually, as you're taking a lot of action, you experience what psychologists call prediction errors, and neuroscientists call them prediction errors as well. A prediction error is while taking bold action or while trying something new, you come to conclusions that you didn't know before. You incorrectly predicted what would happen. And when you do that, your brain completely rewires itself so that it resets your memories based on the new views. And so by pursuing 10x goals and by going through an enormous amount of learning and feedback, your brain goes through a lot more, rewiring of itself. In other words, it's far more active. Whereas most people's brains, they get really lazy. They stop making such intense connections as they did as a child. Think about children. They're always playing, but they're also making a lot of prediction errors. They're failing. And the more prediction errors you can get, the more powerful view you'll have of your future. Also, the more your memories will constantly be updating themselves, adapting and changing. Your memory is essentially your working model of the world. And so the more prediction errors you have, the more your memory changes, which enables you to see the world differently. And so you want your brain to be active, creating new connections, rewriting your memories regularly. It'll also enhance your sleep, because while you're asleep, your subconscious is basically rewriting your memories. And so you're going to learn enormously more while you sleep. If you're taking action towards 10x goals, you'll start to see the world differently because you'll be measuring differently. You'll stop competing for average. Back to Tim Ferriss's quote. He said, it's lonely at the top. Big goals are a lot easier than average goals because the competition is fiercest for the average goal. And I would argue the same thing. Very few people are competing, and really you leave the world of competition. You stop competing in general when you just start being what philosophers would call the higher level freedom, which is freedom to be whoever you want, freedom to do what you want, rather than worrying so much about freedom from. Freedom from means you're trying to, escape poverty or escape social constraints. It's really what psychologists would call an avoidance motivation. You're trying to avoid things you don't want rather than just directly pursuing what you want and deciding what you want and walking away from competition, walking away from other people's opinions about you and just deciding this is what I want, this is what I'm going to go for, and then deliberately practicing your way to getting there, becoming adaptive and being fine letting go of your old ways of doing things, even fine letting go of your old identity. One of the things that Adam Grant talks about in his book, Think Again, which is a brilliant book, is that you shouldn't overly attach your current self to your former self, because your former self was a different person than you. They saw things differently. And so you also shouldn't overly attach your current constraints to your future goals. That's what a growth mindset is you don't worry so much about your current constraints. It doesn't matter that you may not have the knowledge or the skills or the connections. Instead, you just focus on your goal and finding a way to get there, and you don't really worry. You actually minimize your current self. It's okay that you're not there yet. It's okay that you don't have all the knowledge yet. As you move forward, you're going to learn a lot more. And also, one other aspect of all this, as you're pursuing big goals and making progress, you're going to build amazing confidence, which is really good for imagination. There's a great quote from Albert Einstein. He said, imagination is more important than knowledge. And so the more you're taking action towards big goals, the more you're actually watching yourself do things that you imagined in your mind, your confidence skyrockets, which further propels your imagination, which is brilliant for your brain, brilliant for your sleep. And so big goals are easier than small goals. Big goals are better for your brain. There's less competition for big goals. And also there's one more important thing that you need to realize. It really doesn't matter if you hit the goal. Like, that's the thing that most people miss, is that they think if they miss the goal, they're a failure. They're not. There's a great concept from Dan Sullivan called the gain in the gap. Rather than measuring yourself against your ideal, you measure yourself against where you were before. You measure yourself against your former self. And if you're only measuring yourself against yourself rather than against other people, or even against your own ideals, then you're always making progress. And if you're always making progress, you're going to feel happy. You're going to boost your confidence. And your imagination is going to keep growing. And you're going to keep staying in the gain where you're just feeling good. You're taking goal-directed action. You're not worried about other people's opinion of you. And you're living a unique, powerful life. So I invite you to make your goals enormously bigger. Worry less about what other people think. Stop competing with other people. As Peter Thiel would say, competition's for losers. And then enjoy the play of deep learning. Enjoy the play of prediction errors. Enjoy the joy of being wrong. And that's interestingly, that's Adam Grant's podcast, is the joy of being wrong. But have joy in knowing that your current self isn't the be-all, end-all. Your future self will be far less ignorant than you. Even Josh Waitzkin, the person who wrote the book, The Art of Learning, he always asks himself, what did I believe 3 months ago that I don't believe today? Be fine knowing that your current self doesn't have all the answers. Your future self will be a lot better equipped, to the extent that you have a lot of prediction errors along the way, and your brain keeps rewriting itself, sleeping better, working harder, becoming far more connected. So big goals are much more motivating. They're more hopeful. They're more inspiring. They're more exciting. They lead to a much more enjoyable, playful life, but also enormously better for your brain, your sleep, your imagination, your creativity, and your confidence. So set massive goals. There are 3 levels of goals. All 3 of these you want. If you have all 3, not only will you be really clear on who you are and where you're going, you'll have peace of mind. It'll honestly slow time down and make you feel like you've got a lot of clarity, but also it'll give you a lot of productivity. So the highest level is the why, the second level is the what, the third level is the how. Let me explain. Why goals could be in the form of your purpose. So Stephen Kotler and Peter Diamandis, they talk about having a massively transformative purpose. This could be a sense of calling, mission, purpose. I would challenge you to have no more than 3, but you could have 3 aligning purposes. What psychologists call harmonious passion means that you've got multiple goals or multiple aspects of your life, but they all harmoniously help each other. They're all pointing in the same direction. They all support each other. So you could have 3 why, big purposes. This is your North Star. So it could be to heal the world of addiction, as my friend Joe Polish is. It could be whatever you want. It could be just to help animals, or it could be to help people learn about God. It could be just, could be to help yourself reach a certain level. Purpose goals, though, are different from passion, because purpose usually takes you out of yourself and out into the world where you have a cause and you're helping someone else usually. I would challenge you to have no more than 3, 1 to 3 major purposeful goals. And why I like the idea of massively transformative purposes is that by pursuing it, your life transforms and you transform over time as a result. The second level is the what, which is what psychologists would call high, hard goals. The research shows that really high, really challenging and hard goals are way more motivating, exciting, and interesting than low goals. And these high, hard goals are not things you can accomplish in a weekend. They're things that may take several months or several years to accomplish. These could be things like getting a college degree, a PhD. It could be writing a book. It could be qualifying for the Boston Marathon. It could be building a business and selling it. You get to determine the high, hard goal. But one of the reasons why you want high hard goals is obviously as you get better and better at accomplishing high hard goals, through that process of getting up there and achieving something big, you now have new levels of confidence. You've created a new trajectory, you've created a new situation. But also, having further out goals is really powerful. Having goals that are further out allows you to run your own race. It allows you to have more power versus force. If you're constantly trying to force really short-term outcomes rather than having a nice long trajectory, then you're going to probably avoid the deep learning of the process. One of the things that Kobe Bryant said when he was young is, his first year playing basketball, he was horrible, but then he really committed to the long-term goal of becoming really good, and that allowed him to fall in love with the process. It allowed him also to get more creative and courageous because he was playing a longer game. Like, it was okay if he missed this game or failed or missed that shot or failed this game or even failed this season because he was playing a really long game. And so you want far out goals. You want high, hard goals, challenging goals. I would even challenge you to have goals that are big enough that they may take 3, 5, or 10 years to accomplish. I recently thought about where I want to be in 2030, which is in like 8.5 years from now, because I believe that that's when my wife and I are going to be moving from where we live, which is in Florida. It's just a really good timeline. That's when our youngest that we adopted, so we adopted 3 kids, and then we have 3 other kids. But the youngest one that we adopted is 9, and I believe he'll be going out when he's 18, whether that be college, serving a church mission, or something else. And so we've got until 2030. And so that allowed me to think, okay, I've got a lot of time. I can set some serious high, hard goals. And the nice part about having far out goals is it slows time down. It removes anxiety. It allows you to not feel rushed. You have this huge vision. There's a great quote that says, "Good timber does not grow with ease. The stronger wind, the stronger trees, the further sky, the greater length, the more the storm, the more the strength, by sun and cold, by rain and snow. In trees and men, good timbers grow." But the part that's really cool, obviously that whole poem is cool, that's by Douglas Malloch, but the further sky, the greater length. The further out you can project, the slower your time goes. From a time relativity standpoint, the further you go and the faster you go, the slower time passes. And so having a far out vision slows time down. It removes anxiety. It allows you to think what you really want. One of the things that Dan Sullivan, the co-founder of Strategic Coach, says is, if you have like 10, 15, 20 years to do something, almost anything becomes possible. You could create 10x, 100x, whatever you're currently doing if you've got enough time. There's no unrealistic goals. There's only unrealistic timelines. So having high, hard goals that are big, really powerful, really challenging. I, for example, have a goal of eventually selling 10 million books. But that might take me a decade. It might take me until 2030 when my son's moving out. But that's okay. Because I have 8 years to do it, I can really just engage in a beautiful process. I can enjoy my life here and now. I don't have to be always wanting to be there, but I can enjoy being here because I know I'm walking on this amazing path. So the third level of goals is what are called specific goals. These are more your hows. So for example, if I want to sell 10 million books, or if I want 1 million subscribers on YouTube, and these are just my own goals, my specific goal for today may be to write 500 words or to film 2 YouTube videos. Specific goals are things you can accomplish right now. You can actually get them done like today or this week. So specific goals are like things on your daily to-do list. I would challenge you to have no more than 3 items on a daily basis that are specific goals. Those should be focused on impact, not based on busyness. You got to look at your vision of your future self, your high-level purpose, and even your high, hard goals, which are out there, and you got to ask yourself, what is the most effective, powerful thing I can do right now that would help me achieve that? Another way of getting to a specific goal is asking yourself, when you look at your high, hard goal, in my case, it could be selling 10 million books. In your case, it may be getting into the Boston Marathon or starting a business. When you clarify the outcome that you want, one of the most powerful ideas I've heard is called minimum effective dose. I first learned this from Tim Ferriss in his book, The 4-Hour Body. It's actually a concept in pharmacy. So minimum effective dose means what's the minimum dosage for something to get the desired result. In the case of medicine, what's the minimum effective, dosage to get a result for the person? The opposite is called maximum effective dose. What's the maximum dosage of something in order, then it stops being effective. So what's cool about minimum effective dose is you ask yourself the question, what is the minimum requirement to get the desired result I want? When it comes to, for example, boiling water, water boils at 212 degrees. That's the minimum dosage for boiling water. Anything above that's wasteful. So if you're up at 250 degrees, you're just wasting energy. You could have gotten the same result somewhere down here. So once you've clarified your high hard goal, your specific goal, an amazing question could be, what's the minimum effective dose to achieving that? What's the minimum requirement to getting that outcome? And then that can give you clarity for specific high value, high caliber, specific goals that you can then set to getting there. One of the reasons why I like this model of having all three of these is that your high hard goals allow you to fall in love with the process. They allow you to slow time down. They allow you to really enjoy the present moment because you're here and now. You're in this moment. You're appreciating this moment. As an example for me, I know I've got probably 8 years, barring any unforeseen event, living here in Orlando, Florida. That means I can just fully enjoy this. I can fully enjoy writing those books, doing what I'm doing, raising my kids, taking them to tennis lessons and things like that. And the chapter's got some length. It's also got some depth. That's how you can be like the tortoise, for example. You got the tortoise and the hare. The tortoise is the slow compounding effect of just engaging in the process, playing the long game, not overly trying to just rush it. And so you can engage in high hard goals that are really powerful, big. They allow you to play your own game. They allow you to enjoy where you're at. They allow you to just engage in the process. They create huge compounding effects if you be consistent. But why I like the specific goals and also maybe more short-term targets, like weekly targets, monthly targets, where you've got shorter-term timelines and you're focused on high impact, is that then you can have sprints. You still want to have sprints. You don't want to just be in slow motion. You do want to have short-term intense objectives that push you way outside your comfort zone, but they're more specific. And so then you can also be the hare. You can ask yourself, what's the most bold, courageous thing I can do right now to get to my future self? Or what's a quantum leap I can make? Or what's a wormhole I can create? Or who's someone I can reach out to that if I create this connection or if I create this outcome, then I'll immediately be where I'm at. Maybe if your high hard goal is right now 10 years away, but you're able to create some sprint, you might be able to cut that time in half. So you can be the tortoise and the hare. You can have this nice, peaceful, present, compounding effect of just being consistent towards your bigger term future self, while at the same time having shorter term specific targets that are 80-20, meaning they're focused on outcome, they're focused on effectiveness, they're not just you being busy. And you can take bold, courageous, short-term actions towards your future self with the security net of your long-term goals. That's one of the things that Kobe Bryant found, is that once he got committed to the big game, the long game, it actually gave him permission to be more courageous in the short term because he wasn't forcing things anymore. He could be courageous. He could fail. He could risk things because he was playing a longer game. It wasn't do or die in that moment. It was like, yeah, if you fail, it's okay because you've got tomorrow and you've got next week, next year. Like you're committed to this in the long run. You've got really high hard goals, and your specific goals can be far more courageous based, far more creative based, far more outcome based. So I love those 3 levels of goals. Kind of to break it down more simply, I would challenge you to have no more than 3 high-level why purposes. You define what are the 3 organizing principles for my life, or what are the 3 things that I care about more than anything else. And then from there, what are some high, hard goals that I could pursue that would help, would allow me to live out that purpose, but would also get me to a place in my life and in my trajectory that would be super exciting and would be a process that I would love going through, that maybe over the next 3, 5, 10 years, if I continue and be consistent with that, like everything could be on a totally fundamentally different level. And then from there, your short-term goals, I would challenge you to have no more than 3 on a daily basis. Have no more than even 3 on a weekly basis. What are your big 3 for the week? What are the 3 outcomes that, if accomplished, would make massive exponential progress towards your big goals? I like the idea of having the slow, peaceful, mindful consistency of the tortoise while having the short-term, you can be courageous, you can take risks, you can be bold, because you have the security blanket that you do have a long-term vision, and you're going to stay at it whether you win or lose, whether you hit or don't hit on like maybe your short-term courage bursts. you're still just moving forward and you're playing the long game. You're committed to the long game. You're secure in yourself. You're running your own race. So those are the 3 levels of goals. In this video, I'm going to break down all of the psychology, but also the core essentials to achieving literally any goal and getting better and better at achieving increasingly bigger goals easier. It gets easier and easier to achieve goals and honestly to spontaneously create outcomes that are beyond whatever you could imagine. Let me give you a quick example, and then I'm going to walk you through the core principles of mastering the idea of imagining a future and then creating that future very quickly, and then getting better and better at creating what most people would consider extreme luck or impossibilities. Most people they have such a limiting view of the world that they don't really understand how it works. But as you start to increase your perspective, as you start to realize how space and time work, as you start to realize the power of your mind, you start to be able to visualize outcomes and then to honestly and spontaneously, organically create them very quickly. Let me tell a quick story real quick, and then I will share with you key principles that will transform your life. They really will. I can tell you this, they've transformed my life. And I'm continuously blown away. Even when I start to doubt these principles, even after you've experienced this over and over and over again, you can still try to falsify them. That's a big part of science, by the way, is trying to falsify an idea. There's sometimes when I go against these principles simply to attempt to falsify them. And then the opposite occurs where I start to create chaos in my life. And I realize the opposite is also true, that if I'm living in misalignment with these principles, which I'm about to share with you, then chaos starts to ensue and I start to fall apart and lose everything I have. It's really interesting. So real quick, just a quick story. So this house that I'm in right now, this is an office that I bought 2 or 3 years ago. This is about 15 minutes away from my residence, which I live in. Recently, literally in less than a month, the last month, it's been in my mind that I would love or wish I had a house, this office, or a house like this in my neighborhood, in the neighborhood of my residence, because this is 15 minutes away. It's not that bad, but it's a commute that I don't necessarily care for. I mean, me and my family are planning on living in this area for the next 8 years. We have 6 kids. We have 3 that we adopted from the foster system. And the youngest of the older group, which are the ones we adopted, is 10 years old. And so we imagine we're going to be living here in this area. We live in Orlando, Florida. We imagine we'll still be here for the next 8 years until that 10-year-old becomes 18 and either serves a church mission, goes to college, whatever he decides to do. So we have 8 years here. And it just dawned on me recently, and it's only been a month, that this has been on my mind. But whatever you focus on expands. Whatever you start to think about, you start to see. As William James said, he's the father of American psychology, there are millions of things going on around you which you're not even aware of because they have no meaning to you. Your experience is what you choose to pay attention to. And so it's been on my mind the last month that I want a house in my neighborhood so that I don't have to make this 15-minute commute. Also, my neighborhood's nicer. It's in a gated community. It's safer. I don't have to think about a lot of things, such as, is my house being broken into, my office and things like that. There's 2 big ideas here. One is being able to mentalize an idea. I can mentally say, I like the idea of having my office house, a second home in my neighborhood. But mentally wanting something and emotionally believing it are 2 completely different things. Let me give a few quotes. One is a quote from Napoleon Hill. Napoleon Hill said, "Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, the mind can achieve." The second part's more important. You can conceive a lot of things. I love the quote from Albert Einstein. He said, "Imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is based on experience of the past. Knowledge keeps you stuck and dogmatic in your current views, whereas imagination is the key to learning. It's also the key to growth, and it's the key to clarifying where you want to go." Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, the mind can achieve. That second part is much harder, believing. There's a great book by Gary Cady. He wrote Raise Your Healthy Deserve Level. And in that book, he talks about how in life, you don't get what you deserve, but you get what you believe you deserve. And a lot of people, they don't create progress in their life because emotionally they resist it. It's not enough to just see a better future in your mind. You have to also emotionally feel like you're worthy of it, emotionally feel like you can have it, emotionally feel like you deserve it. This level of deserving is not ego. It's not a sense that you're better than someone else or that you deserve blah, blah, blah. It's an emotional acceptance that you're not a bad person for having it. It doesn't make you better or worse for having it. It's just a question of, Do you believe you deserve it? Do you believe you deserve healthy relationships? Do you believe you deserve a healthy income? Do you believe you deserve health and fitness? Do you believe you deserve whatever it is you think you want? If you don't believe you deserve it, then you will subconsciously avoid it. Gay Hendricks talks about this in the book, The Big Leap. He talks about what he calls the upper limit problem. And this upper limit problem is where someone starts to make progress in their life, but then they subconsciously self-sabotage because it's out of their comfort zone. This may be someone who's never had money, and then they start to make good money. And so they flush all that money down the toilet to get back to their emotional baseline, their subconscious baseline. And so they have this upper limit problem of success. And so they revert back to their comfort zone because emotionally, they don't believe they deserve it. Emotionally, they haven't accepted that they can have it. One of the things that Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about is about proactive future-based gratitude, because gratitude leads to a state of acceptance. Gratitude is usually a retrospective concept where you're grateful for what has occurred. And so when you start to be grateful for the future scenarios that you want, you then go from a place of unhealthy needing and attachment to a place of wanting, which is where you want something better, to a place of knowing. You know that what you want can be yours. You've accepted it, you believe you deserve it, and you know you can have it. And so what Dr. Joe Dispenza suggests is being grateful for the future you want, being grateful that it has already occurred, and coming to a place of acceptance. This creates what Florence Shinn, the American author from the early 1900s, said. She said, faith knows it has already received and acts accordingly. So faith knows it has already received and then acts accordingly. You accept the future reality, you're grateful for it, you're at peace with it, you believe you deserve it, and then you start acting from your future self. You don't act to it, because if you're acting to your goals, you're acting from your current self's perspective. And your current self is not your future self. But if you accept your future self and you start to reverse engineer it, you start to think from your goal, then you can start to make nonlinear exponential progress. You can start to see pathways that would get you there much faster. What I would call a slipstream or a wormhole. A slipstream is just basically a radically accelerated pathway to where you want to go. A wormhole is essentially, you could call it luck, but it's essentially a space that drops you into your desired future. And so this takes me back to my story. I've been thinking about wanting and just thinking about, it would be nice to have a house in my neighborhood. That would be my office. It would save me 30 minutes of driving a day. It would save me a lot of peace of mind of not worrying about this house. And why not? Seriously, why not? It's a financial investment. There's nothing crazy about it. It's real estate, essentially. As I've been thinking about this, just literally 2 or 3 days ago, there was a woman parked outside my neighborhood, or outside my house. And I was a little confused. And so I just went up and asked her who she was. And I found out she was a member of the HOA. And I just started to talk to her a little bit, HOA in the neighborhood. And I asked her randomly, I just said, is it, by any chance, do you know if there's any houses for sale in this neighborhood? In this neighborhood, in my neighborhood, less than 2 houses have sold in the last 6 to 8 months. It's just not a neighborhood that sells a lot. And in this market's a pretty crazy market right now. But anyway, she said, actually, interestingly, yes, a house is going up for sale this weekend. And there's going to be an open house this weekend where a lot of people are going to come in and look at the house. I thought, it's interesting. I said, can you give me the contact info of the owners? I would like to talk to them. And anyway, she actually suggested I just give her my name, my phone number. And so I gave them my address, which is in their neighborhood. I gave them my name, my phone number. And then later that day, I got a call from their realtor. Basically, I ended up going over to the house, looking at the house. They gave me the price that they wanted for the house, and I could buy it pre-listing. And it's honestly exactly the house I want. It's like less than a 1-minute walk away from my house. Here's what's interesting is even after realizing, holy cow, I can have it. Like, it went from a thought to a thing. I can have what I want. I actually then had to go through about a day of emotional processing and actually unwinding. Is this a good decision? Is this frivolous? I'd need to sell this house, which it will sell very quickly and easily. I'd have to go through a lot of work kind of making the other house how I want. I've made this kind of a sanctuary how I want it. It would take a decent chunk of money and also a good amount of time, probably a month, to get the other house into kind of a sanctuary that I want it. So it took me some time, but after having a few conversations, after praying, meditating, and journaling on it, I realized this is exactly what my future self would do. Now, if I'm making a decision based on my current self or my current fears, it seems like too much work, or it seems out of my league. But if I'm thinking about it from my future self, it's the most obvious decision. It'll save me so much time in commuting. There's a lot of hidden benefits and psychological benefits to this upgrade. So anyways, I've made the decision. I get the house pre-listing. I'm going to sell this house. Literally, we're going to put this thing on the market in like 3 days, and it's going to sell very quickly. I already know that. And I'll just move forward. And so I just wanted to share with you a few quick principles to end this video. First off, imagination is more important than knowledge. Your view of your future is the driver of your present. Most people have what David Logan would call a default future. He talks about this in the book, The 3 Laws of Performance. A default future is not the future you want. It's not the future you hope for. It's the future that you, in the gut level, know is going to happen. You already know what's going to happen. And that default future comes from your current view of the world. You see the world not as it is, but as you are. And the only way to change that default future and create the life you want is to start imagining the future you want and then to start talking about it. Your language shapes your perception. The words you use, and most people, they literally speak themselves into the grave. They're describing all of the problems. They watch media that's negative. Most media is designed to give you a negative view of the future. It's designed to destroy your hope. And so most people, they watch fear-based negative media. They speak about things that they don't want. And so they're speaking problems into existence, and they have a default future that they don't want. And that's the future that they're going to create. But if you imagine the future you want, you start talking about it, you start speaking of it, then you'll start to see it. You'll start to become aware of it, as I did. And then you'll start to act upon it. And then you have to go through the emotional process of believing that you deserve it and that you do deserve it. And then you'll ultimately have to make a commitment and courage and go forward. You can do this all with a state of peace, though. I'm in complete peace. I'm in complete peace that I can create the outcomes that I want. But even still, I have emotional friction along the way. As you speak about the future you want, that's what David Logan calls generative language. In the book, The Magic of Thinking Big, he says you can either speak castles into existence or you can speak yourself into the grave. I invite you to start speaking castles into existence. Imagination is more important than knowledge. Imagine the future you want. Start speaking about the future you're going to create. Use generative language, language that generates and creates. Stop defining your current self. Start describing your future self and what you're going to do. I'm going to have a great day. This is what BJ Fogg calls tiny habits. When he steps out of bed, he says it's going to be a great day. That's called creative generative language, future-based language. You can do this every day. I can wake up and say, it's going to be a brilliant day. I'm going to be productive. I'm going to be present with my kids. I'm going to create the life I want. I'm going to write a brilliant book. I'm going to publish a book that sells millions of copies. You can speak whatever future you want, or you can just describe the problems of your present. So as just a last thought, clarify your future self, eliminate everything that does not resonate. And as you actually commit to a 10x bigger and clearer future self, you will become radically aware of everything you do need to eliminate. You'll need to eliminate your lesser goals. You'll need to eliminate the distractions. You'll need to eliminate anything that does not resonate with your future self. How you do anything is how you do everything. And so once you start to scale up to your future self, it becomes more and more about quality, not quantity. Qualitative internal changes. The qualitative internal changes, as Stephen Covey said, private victory precedes public victory. That's why you need to clarify your future self and then come to a state of acceptance, gratitude, and peace, and then to start to eliminate all of the areas of your life that distract or discord from your new future self. From there, you'll get increasingly committed and excited about your future self. You'll stop worrying about what people think about you. You'll start making your own decisions based on your own aims, and you'll start to see and create pathways to getting exactly what you want easily and effortlessly. The hardest part about this is reducing the emotional friction. Coming to a state of clarity, a state of acceptance, a state of confidence, acting from your future self in a nonlinear manner, not to your future self. I know that if you apply these principles, you can create bigger and bigger results. You can accept better and incredible realities, and you can create luck, miracles, wormholes, whatever you want to describe. You can create the outcomes you want very quickly. And it's not about your time frames. Space-time is relative, as Einstein would say. Space and time are manipulated by you. They're curved. And so I can get to a desired destination in a week that may have taken my former self a decade. And I can learn as much in a week as my former self may have learned in a decade if I'm willing to go through that intense learning. And that's nonlinear growth. That's fast transformation, which slows time down, which allows me to live multiple lifetimes in a single life. And so here's his question. He asks himself this question very regularly. How can I achieve my 10-year plan in the next 6 months? First off, you got to realize that time is actually a measure of distance. Time is a measure of distance traveled. And according to time relativity, the faster an object moves through space relative to something else, the slower that time is. And if you've ever seen the movie Interstellar, the Christopher Nolan movie, you understand what I'm talking about. So in that movie, Earth has become an unsafe place, and some astronauts jump through a wormhole. They go to a different galaxy, and they're looking at different planets to see if there's another planet that would be safe for humanity to inhabit. Well, one of the planets that they want to check out is orbiting a black hole, and because it's orbiting so fast, it's moving so fast relative to our Earth's orbit that for every 1 hour those astronauts spend on that planet, 7 years pass by on Earth. So they've got to go to that planet, get in and get out quick, because it's moving so fast through space that their time is so slow. Again, the faster an object moves through space, the slower time goes relative to something else. And in this case, it's moving thousands of times faster through space than our Earth. It travels the same amount of distance in 1 hour as our Earth travels in 7 years. And so time is really based on distance traveled. And according to time relativity, my time and your time are very different. Think about, for example, someone who can make $1 million in an hour versus someone who can make $1 million can't even make $1 million in a lifetime. Those are the same goal, but one person can achieve it in 1 hour, whereas one person spends more than a lifetime grinding it out. And so one person, it might have taken 60 years to travel the same distance when it comes to a single goal as one person could achieve in 1 hour. And so that one person was able to travel the same distance in an hour as the other person was able to travel in 60 years. And so when it comes to Peter Thiel's question, how can I achieve my 10-year plan in 6 months? What he's really asking himself is, he's saying right now, based on my current velocity, based on my current trajectory, based on my current strategy and my current pathway, it's going to take me approximately 10 years to get from where I am to where I want to go, because you're looking at time as a distance traveled. And he's asking himself, basically, how can I get onto a different planet or a different strategy or a different pathway, or how can I find a wormhole that would get me to that same destination but in only 6 months? And of course, there are ways. There are ways. I don't know the way, but a lot of it has to do with how committed you are. Now, there are wormholes. There's ways to get to where you want to go fast, but it may require an enormous amount of courage. It would require you doing things radically different than how you're currently doing things. But you can travel the same distance in 6 months or in 10 years. It's kind of your choice. Now, if you're going to reduce the timeline of a 10-year goal down to 6 months, there's actually a great concept called Pearsons Law. And basically what Pearsons Law states, and it's an economic principle, is work fills the space of the amount of time you give it. And so if, for example, you give yourself 10 years to achieve a goal, it's going to take you 10 years to achieve the goal. If you give yourself 6 months to achieve the goal, you might break a few things, you might crack some eggs, but you could probably find a way to getting there. Psychological flexibility is an idea in psychology where you become very flexible and adaptive. It also connects with high hope. High hope versus low hope. High hope people are very flexible and adaptive, and they're willing to find new pathways to getting where they want to go. But in order to have high hope, you have to actually be highly committed to a specific result. Now, I actually wrote an entire book back in 2015 on this subject. So let me just tell you the story of this book to prove the point. I wrote this book with zero knowledge about the publishing world. I wrote this before I ever had a website, before I ever had a blog. I wrote it and I thought I could just go get a publisher. And so what I ended up doing after I had written this little book, which is all about how to essentially jump through wormholes, slipstream time hacking. It's a self-help book essentially based on time relativity and based on what we're talking about now. So I wrote the book and then I started calling literary agents and asking them, how do I get this book published? And they all told me the exact same thing. Well, how many email subscribers do you have? What's your website? And I said, I don't even have a website. I don't have any email subscribers, but this is a really good book. And they're like, you can't actually publish this book unless you have an audience. You have to have an audience. The publisher doesn't care about your book. They want to know how they're going to sell it. And the only way for them to sell it is through your audience. And I said, okay, well, what do I need to do to actually do it? And they said, well, you need probably 5,000 email subscribers. And I said, okay, I'll go get them. And they said, well, that's not going to be easy. It's going to take you like 3 to 5 years to achieve that goal if you're just starting from the bottom. And I thought, okay, that's based on their belief system. But I guarantee there's a way I could get there faster. And so I started doing research and looking at people who have millions of email subscribers, and I found ways to actually get hundreds of thousands of email subscribers. But in this case, within the next 6 months, I found a way to get 20,000 email subscribers. Within a year, I was able to have 100,000 email subscribers and ultimately get the book deal that I wanted, actually a very great book deal. But there are ways to getting there. Now, most people, they think it's going to take 3 to 5 years, whereas other people know that you can get there in 2 weeks. And so there are different perspectives, and there are also different strategies. There's a concept of fleas in a jar. And basically what the researchers did is they put a bunch of fleas in a jar. And the fleas could easily jump out of the jar. But what they did is they put a lid on top of that jar, and basically the fleas were jumping and hitting their heads at the top of the jar. And eventually they trained themselves to stop jumping so high. And then what happened is later on the researchers unscrewed the lid, and the fleas no longer had the ability to jump outside the jar because they had been trained to not jump so high. So if you want to achieve your 10-year plan in 6 months, you can. But it's going to require you to jump outside the jar. There's a great quote that says you can't read the label from within the jar. You've got to jump way out of the jar. You've got to start breaking down your assumptions of how things work. Why did you decide that this takes 10 years to achieve? And who are some people who achieve that result or 10x that result in far less time? You've got to go and rethink your view of the world. You've got to go and rethink your view of time. You've got to go find that wormhole. There are wormholes, but you've got to be willing to be adaptive and flexible, and you've got to be willing to essentially let go of the life you currently have. I recently did this. So I wrote a book called Personality Isn't Permanent. This is a book that I published with Penguin Random House, a specific imprint of Penguin Random House, and it's a very prestigious publisher. And they, for my second book with them, offered me a very terrible book deal. They offered me a very low book deal, but because I was slightly desperate at the time, I took the bad book deal. But then I started to understand a concept that Dan Sullivan actually calls always be the buyer. Dan Sullivan has a concept called always be the buyer, and what he means by that is that in every situation, you're either the buyer or the seller. The seller is someone who is trying to get something, and they're willing to bend over backwards to get it. In this case, I was the seller, not for this book, but for the next book. I was the seller because I was willing to give whatever the buyer was willing to take. My publisher was the buyer because they set the terms. They decided what they would buy and what they would reject. And once I learned to be the buyer, meaning I decided what I wanted and I stopped trying to sell myself, but instead I just bought what I wanted. I got what I wanted. I had to define success for myself. I was able to reject that deal. And I was able to set the terms for a deal I wanted with a different publisher, and was able to get a 4-book deal for over 10 times the amount of money. Now that's a nonlinear jump. That was me finding a new and different pathway, a very non-conventional pathway. Now, if you're willing to find a non-conventional pathway, and if you're willing to try non-conventional methods, you can achieve 10-year plans in 6 months. You can find wormholes. You can find crazy situations if you're willing and if you're committed to finding those different pathways and if you're willing to go through those different pathways. The question is, are you committed to something specific? And if you're committed, are you willing to find an alternative pathway? In psychology, pathways thinking is a huge aspect of hope. It's a huge aspect of agency as well. If you believe you have agency and if you have hope and commitment towards a specific goal, then you're willing to find a pathway that will get you there effectively. Now, some pathways require a lot of courage. In fact, if you're going to take a 10-year plan and shrink it down to 6 months, the more direct path is going to probably require the most emotional purging. That's why psychological flexibility is so important. It may require asking certain people for help, or trying things that just your former self would never do, or being willing to be directly bold, blunt, and honest, or rejecting great opportunities that your former self would have loved. My former self would have absolutely accepted that book deal, and actually they did accept the book deal, but my current self, as the buyer, rejected that, and I was able to find a situation that saved me 10 years of plodding along. And so the question is, are you committed to results, or are you just committed to your current strategy? If you're committed to your current strategy, or your current perspective or your current way of doing things, then it might take you a really long time. But if you're committed to a certain result, and if you're willing to find the most effective path to getting there, you can jump through wormholes. You can save 10 years, 20 years, 50 years. And you can learn ways, you can learn how to create results that your former self never could have. I can make more money now in a month than my former self could have made in 10 years or 20 years. Like the Benjamin Hardy of 2010, the current version of me can make as much money in 4 weeks as it would have taken the 2010 Benjamin Hardy probably over 100 years at my old trajectory, because I was on another planet. Whatever planet you're on, in terms of your trajectory, in terms of your state of being, in terms of your commitment, determines how fast you travel through space. So you can achieve 10-year goals in 6 months, but you've got to be a different person. You got to find new ways. You got to find your wormhole, and you've got to find that alternative pathway. The question is, are you willing to do that? there's a few questions I have about the story, but the main reason this story stuck out to me, and then I want to kind of dig deeper into this. One is, so in psychology, there's a concept called pathways thinking. It's a fundamental aspect of motivation and hope. So hope and motivation are very similar concepts in psychology. They're actually slightly distinct, but they both have very similar components. One is, in order to have hope and motivation, you have to have a goal, whatever that goal is. In the case of your father, what would you say his goal? His goal was he wanted to be an artist, but would you say
a great artist? Yeah.
Would you say he wanted to be an artist that he could not only want to be a great artist, but he wanted to provide for his family through his art? Like, was he clear on his goal? Like when he first presented it to your mom, he wanted to be a professional artist, right?
He wanted to be a professional artist. That was his goal. Yeah.
So that was the goal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in order to have hope and motivation, you need generally three things. One, you need a goal, whatever that is, some specific goal. In the case of your dad, he wanted to be a professional artist. Then you need a pathway. So this takes us to pathways thinking. You need some mechanism, pathway, process from getting from A to B. From his standpoint, his initial pathway was going to community college classes, right? Or adult education, however you describe it. That was the pathway he was initially on. And then the third aspect of these is you've got to have some form of confidence or agency that you can actually to walk the path or find a better path. And a big aspect of hope is what, pathways thinking is finding new and better pathways to where you want to go. So when you said he went straight from community college to straight to the master, obviously that's a fundamentally different pathway to the goal, a much more effective pathway. My first question is about Kitty West.
Uh-huh.
So he was at an art store.
Yes.
So he was at an art store, and what the heck was going on? He was just buying more art and he was talking about his goal. What was going on there?
Yeah. So as I recall, Kitty West worked at the store. And
so this was just a regular art store in California?
Just a regular art store in Santa Barbara.
Okay.
And so he's in the art store buying some art, talking about, and he gets in a conversation with Kitty West. And she, I think she sees his passion as one. My dad's a passionate guy. You don't become a full-time baseball player or a professional baseball player just by, you have to have that pathway, right, to become a professional baseball player. My dad directed it towards, okay, now I want to be an artist. So she sensed that. And she didn't know much about Claude Buck other than he had moved to town, and she knew of his reputation. So that's what it was. It was like it's kind of random in a sense.
Well, but I would say he probably was talking about his goal of becoming a professional artist.
Oh yeah.
He was expressing and vocalizing what he was trying to do. He wasn't hiding it. It seemed like he was very vocal. I want to be a professional artist, and so this is what I'm doing. I'm going to go to adult education classes. Obviously his passion and his, he was a good human being, and people were drawn to him, and he's a lovely soul, but I'm guessing he was talking about his goal and his ambitions, right? Yes, wouldn't you say?
I would say that's absolutely correct. Because otherwise there would be no reason for her to say, if you want to become a great artist, go to the master. If you want to just, it's a hobby, continue going to adult education, right? Why to go to the master if it's not something like that, like a big goal is what you're talking about?
Yeah. My guess is he was very explicit with Kitty West that I'm really wanting to become a professional artist. I want to provide for my family. And obviously he was genuine. He was like, I want to do this well. I love art. Yeah. This is what I see myself doing. It seemed like, and this is just my gut, I'm just listening. I'm just, I'm actually really just asking you, but it seemed like he was very committed to figuring out how to get there. Maybe, obviously this conversation pointed him towards a more unique pathway, a direct and more effective pathway. Yeah. But the only reason I think he was even open to hearing it was because he was super committed to that goal and he was talking to people about it. And so when someone's like, go straight to the master, he was like, it wasn't just like a theoretical idea. It's like, I'm going to go do that. Like, this is a new pathway. I didn't know about Claude Buck maybe. And so I'm going to just go to this guy and find him. It kind of reminds me of the quote, when the why is strong enough, you'll find the how.
Yes.
And usually that how is actually a who, going back to who, not how. Like usually it is a who, but that whole idea that when the why is strong enough, you'll find the how is the idea of pathways thinking. You'll find a path to where you want to go if you're very committed to it. And it seems like your father was insanely committed to that goal. He was not ashamed of it. He was sharing it with people and people could feel that.
Yep.
And so Kitty West was like, look, this guy's serious. Like, you should try to go to the master. And he was so in tune with it or excited about it. He went to it. I'm just wondering your take on all this.
Well, so let me illuminate that a little bit, because you bring up some really good points. So my mom tells this story kind of in the early stages before Claude Buck. She tells a story about how she went with my dad to the art store one day, and she felt sorry for him because there were other artists in there who knew what they were doing. You know, they knew the brushes to get, they knew this and that, the other thing. And she said, you know, poor Don. You know, it's like he's overmatched, but he's got this desire. So I'm going to support him in this desire and in this goal. When Kitty West said to my dad, so here's the rest of the story. Here's his phone number. Here's his address. Now,
So she had his phone number and his address.
He had his phone number and his address. And so I don't know if he's giving lessons, but I know that this is his phone number and his address. Probably selling paintings or something. Now, what could my dad have done? One, gone home and eventually reached out to Claude Buck. He could have gone home and called him. My dad immediately, it wasn't the next day, it wasn't an hour later, he left the store and drove to 512 North Milpas Street. So that's reflective of, this is what I want. This is my goal. It's not a passing fancy, you know, like you're saying. He was talking about it. So that's why Kitty West knew about it, right? If you want to become a great artist, she didn't say, if you want to learn to paint, go to the master. If you want to become a great artist, that's what my dad reflected in the conversation. That's his goal. Go to the master. And then my dad, it was $5 a lesson. This was 1962. So that might have, I don't know what that is comparable to now, $45, $50, something like that.
How much?
My dad started going over and taking lessons from Claude Buck. And Claude said, after a short time, pay me for one lesson a week, because that's what my dad was doing. But you can come over anytime you want and paint with me during the week. My dad was over there all the time during lunch and at the kitchen table at night and Saturdays. I mean, I was his favorite model because I was willing to sit, you know, so he would paint me. And I've got like this one here. So I'm sitting down and I've got a big shirt on that he gave me so I don't get, so I'm painting and he painted me, right? So that was kind of in the early days. But my dad, he expressed it. That's right, Ben. He expressed it. I want to become a great artist. I want to be a full-time artist, meaning I don't want another job. This is a job I want, to be an artist, make a living as an artist. And everything about his actions were consistent with that goal. That's probably, as I think about this, everything he did was consistent with achieving that goal.
Yeah, it reminds me of the phrase, you know, will it make the boat go faster? You know, if
yes.
You know, thinking about your father from working with the master to where he's at now, I'm interested in, you know, another reflection on pathways thinking, you know, finding his way to getting his stuff on TV, finding his way to getting his art sold and commissioned and being able to make a living. Like, it seems like because he was really clear on his goal, he was committed to it, he was in love with his process, he was in love with his stuff, he kept, you know, continually educating himself on new and new ways to succeed in his craft. It just seems like he was continuously finding new and better ways to succeed and finding his ways into great opportunities.
People were drawn to him because of his passion, because of the clarity of his goals and thinking. People were drawn to him. Hey, Buck. So his name became Buck Paulson. He took Claude Buck's name. He asked Claude, can I use your name as part of my artist name? So he became Buck Paulson. People came to him and said, Buck, we want to do a television show with you. Sam Battistone, millionaire.
But was it because his art was starting to get out there? How did people even know about him?
So he was doing workshops. So people were talking. A guy named Gary Jenkins, who had a show on television, he told Alexander Art about my dad. You know, hey, he's great. He's a wonderful artist. He's a great teacher. So Alexander Art contacts my dad and they start doing things on television. Then it spreads from there.
Now in this video, I'm going to share with you two things. One is I'm going to share with you how you can involve God in your goals. And the second one is how you can be the most effective person you can be. And I think that those two things actually go hand in hand. God gave you the ability to make choices, and you get to make of your life whatever you want. You can involve God in your life to the extent you want to. You don't have to involve God at all, or you can involve God. This doesn't mean you don't believe in science. Science is amazing. I have a PhD in psychology. I believe in science. I believe in medical advancements. I also believe in faith and believe in God. And faith is basically a vision of things that are not yet seen. In the book Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill said that faith is basically the power by which things are created. Faith mixed with prayer is how you accomplish amazing things. Faith is how people like Thomas Edison invented the light bulb. So having faith does not need to take away from reason or logic. Having faith means that you have a vision for the future, a vision for your future self. Think about Elon Musk as an example. Elon Musk wants to die on Mars. That's an exercise of faith. Yes, he's also applying sound principles of physics, but he also has a vision beyond which we've accomplished. He's got faith in that vision because he understands principles of science and he believes that it can be done, but he also has faith in that vision. So here's how you involve God in your goals. You ultimately have to have a goal. Whatever goal you set is fine. Set whatever goal you want for yourself. It could be to become a millionaire. It could become to write a book. It could be to be a better husband or father. It could be to marry someone. Whatever your goal is, it could be to get into an amazing college. Whatever you have in mind, write it down and pray and ask God if he will help you to do it. There's a great quote that basically says that God is essentially waiting for you to ask for his help. He'll help you with whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, as long as you're actually proactively trying to accomplish something. So what is it you're trying to accomplish, and how can you involve God more in your goals? How can you create more miracles? My wife and I, when I was doing my PhD, we became foster parents of 3 kids. We really wanted to adopt those kids. We spent 3 years fighting the foster system in court for those kids, and there were many episodes where it didn't look like it was going to succeed, but we ultimately prayed. We were able to get the most amazing attorney. He was able to just make the other attorneys look like fools. And we were able to actually get the funds to pay that attorney. I was a college student, but when you have faith, there's this really good quote, and it says, when the why is strong enough, you will find the how. Also, faith precedes the miracle. Exercising faith, seeking success, expecting success, hoping for success, praying for success, and then exercising that faith by actually taking action. Faith is a 2-step process. One is it's a principle of power, meaning you're exercising power both in yourself and God, but it's also an exercise of action. You don't have faith if you're not taking action. So you got to take bold, crazy action. And I can attest, over and over in my life, I have exercised faith. There's even a great book by Hal Elrod. Hal Elrod wrote the book called The Miracle Morning, but he also wrote a book called The Miracle Equation. And basically he said that you need to exercise extreme faith and you need to exercise extreme action. Like, that's how you accomplish amazing things. And when you do that, when you reach that level of commitment towards a goal, then, as William Hutchinson Murray said, providence moves. Once you become fully committed and once you make a decision to accomplish something, and once you begin praying and involving God in that and exercising faith in that, all of a sudden things start happening. Miracles start happening. People start coming. The right people come. The right resources come. The right ideas come. The right knowledge comes. And so it's up to you. If you're not actually living your life by faith, though, you're actually living by default. There's a lot of research in psychology on this subject. The topic is called prospection, but the idea is that as human beings, we can imagine different futures. We can imagine different futures for ourselves, and then we can commit ourselves to those futures. And basically the idea is this, and it's really profound. Whatever future you see for yourself, that's the thing driving your present. If you see yourself just paying the bills, just getting to the weekend so you can watch the football game, that's the present that's driving your current identity and behavior. Or that's the future that's driving your identity and behavior. Whatever future you see for yourself, that's the thing shaping your current identity and your current behavior. Dan Sullivan said the only way to make your present better is by making your future bigger. Well, how do you make your future bigger? You have faith. Faith in that future, hope in that future. There's a quote from Florence Shinn. Florence Shinn said, hope looks forward. Faith knows it has already received and acts accordingly. Hope looks forward. And by the way, there's a lot of research on hope. Without hope, you're screwed. Hope is essential, and this isn't just a religious hope, this is just hope in general. Hope is both the will and the way. In psychology, hope means you have a vision for your future, some specific goal. You have a pathway to getting there. You believe that there's a path to getting there, or you find that path. Again, when my wife and I were trying to adopt our kids, we wanted to adopt those kids. We didn't necessarily know what the path was, but we were willing to find the path, exercise, figure out the path, and eventually we found the right attorney, and we were able to make that goal happen. There's always a way. It's probably non-conventional if you have a non-conventional goal, but if you if you have hope, you will find that path, and you need that path to increase your hope. The last one is actually just the agency, or the belief that you can walk that path and find that path and create that path and accomplish that goal. That's another word for confidence or capability, is developing the agency, the path to achieve the goal. And that agency could come from you or it could come from other people. We, in this case, had confidence in our attorney, but we also had confidence in miracles and angels and things like that. This may sound pretty mystical. It may sound pretty crazy, but it connects with hope. It connects with motivation. It connects with goal setting. It connects with decision making. Essentially, my invitation to you is this: expand your view of your future, get very specific about your future, and then pray and ask God for help. Get committed to that future, expect miracles, expect faith, take extreme action, and learn your lessons. Lessons are repeated until learned. And remove the lesser goals from your life. One of my favorite quotes comes from Robert Brault. Robert Brault said, "We are kept from our goal, not by obstacles, but by a clear path to a lesser goal." We're kept from our goal, not by the obstacles stopping us. It's because we're kept from our goal by clear paths to lesser goals. You've committed to a lesser future in your life. You've committed to smaller future. You don't have that much faith. You're not exercising faith. You're not taking action. You don't believe in your future. Hope looks forward. Faith knows it has already received and acts accordingly. I know my future is going to be great. My future is as bright as my faith. Your future is as bright as your faith. And whatever future you see for yourself, that's the thing shaping your identity and your behavior in the present. So whatever I can look at your present and I can see the faith that you have. Like, that's true of everyone. It's not your past that drives you. It's your vision for your future that drives you. And we all have different visions for our future. Most people, and this is what the research shows, most people's view of the future is that it's basically the same as the present. It may even be worse. There's some slight pessimism, especially if you watch the news a lot. You probably believe that the future of the country may be getting worse. And if you believe that the future is going to be worse, then you not only have no hope, but your behavior, your mindset, your attitude in the present is going to fail, because whatever view you have of the future is what dictates who you are in the present. And so the more faith, hope, and motivation you have towards your future, and the more committed you are to that future, and the more you believe in that future, meaning you have faith in it and you're taking action towards it, the more powerful will be your present, because you'll be taking action, you'll be learning things, you'll be learning lessons so that you can stop repeating the past, you'll be elevating your life, you'll be elevating your subconscious, you'll be elevating your circumstances. Completely up to you. God is willing to invest himself into your affairs as much as you want. You can have God in your life as much as you want. Faith coupled with prayer is how you achieve amazing things. That is what Napoleon Hill said, but that's what religions say as well. One other quick thought. This is another thought from Napoleon Hill, but this is not the gospel of Napoleon Hill. He just said a lot of really good things. He said that if you want your prayers answered, start with gratitude. Gratitude is what creates abundance. You're going to have your prayers answered faster by being grateful for what you currently have and grateful for all that has happened than by seeing the gap. Dan Sullivan, the founder of Strategic Coach, calls this the gap in the game. If you're always focused on the gap between you and your future, then you're not going to have that much power. But if you focus on the gains, if you focus on and appreciate all that's already happened, then you're going to have your faith increased, your confidence increased. Recognize that there's already been insane things that have happened in your life that have brought you to this point. Appreciate those, view those, write them down, be grateful for those constantly, and use that knowledge that bigger things can happen if you exercise more faith. Dr. BJ Fogg is a Stanford psychologist. He wrote the book Tiny Habits, and his research is basically the leading, most authoritative research on how to build good habits. In fact, his research is a lot of the basis of James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, which has sold now millions and millions of copies. There's a principle, though, that BJ Fogg talks about, which you can apply to helping you achieve massive goals. So the principle is celebration, but it's not just that simple. Yes, you want to celebrate your victories. You want to celebrate when you do something good, but there's something a little bit more to that. So let me explain. What BJ Fogg has found is that celebration really instills in you the desire to do that behavior more. So if you do a behavior that you want and you celebrate it, or you celebrate a victory, kind of like a tennis player or a golfer, then you are reinforcing it on an emotional level, because emotions in large part are what create habits. It's why you can actually have a single emotional experience and then create a habit after one time. So celebration is really key, but now mixing this idea with actually achieving higher and higher financial success. One of the things I talked about with my financial advisor recently was setting really high and hard goals. A lot of research in psychology shows that you want to have high, hard goals and very specific, very measurable goals. And so you want to set a powerful target for yourself It could be anything. But once you hit that target, whether that be a number of, an amount of money in your retirement account, whether that be hitting a certain number in your business, whatever the number is or whatever the goal is, have a high, hard goal that you have a monster reward for at the end of. So that reward could be anything. It could be getting yourself a new car. It could be getting new carpet in your house. It could be going on a 3-week trip, whatever it is. You want to have a very compelling, personally motivating reward towards yourself that you get after you achieve a really high, hard target. And that's something that I've recently done, is I've set myself a really beautiful target with my financial advisor and then decided the reward that I would get once I hit that target. And it's amazing. You can get so excited and so motivated. And the reward itself is kind of an external motivator, but it's something that's personally meaningful to you. It's something that's also a symbol to you. Once you actually hit your target and then you celebrate and you reward yourself. It's so important to reward yourself when you hit huge targets, rewarding yourself with meaningful, relevant things. And here's the important thing. Here's another important concept when it comes to rewarding yourself. You don't need to justify to anyone why you want that reward. Dan Sullivan actually has a concept called wanting versus needing, and you don't need to justify what you want. And certainly your reward isn't a status symbol to prove yourself to anyone else. It's actually a confidence building symbol. It's a symbol to you that you're making progress in your life and that you're living your life by design and by intention. And so this is something I recommend you do, because not only does it motivate you to find new ways to getting to your goal faster, but it also then builds your confidence, because as you watch yourself hit certain targets and then reward yourself with something that's super meaningful, reward yourself with a symbol that you're actually moving your life forward. That symbol builds your confidence, which then expands your motivation and your imagination towards bigger and bigger targets. Now, there's something really cool in psychology. It's called pathways thinking. And when you start focusing on a target, you start finding many, many different pathways of getting there. And so it's not just one typical way of getting there. Insanity is doing something over and over and over and expecting a different result. But when you start really getting fixed and focused on a target, then you can find many different pathways to getting there. Kind of like multiple streams of income in a lot of ways. You can find many different pathways and have lots of different energy going towards that goal, which energy and which different pathways and different resources would not have gone towards that goal had you not had the target, had you not been excited. Concentration and focus is really what it takes to build massive momentum. And you have to find a plan that works for you. You have to find a plan and a path and a strategy, but also a goal that works for you. And you can't really worry about what other people think, because other people don't have your goals. Other people don't have your desired outcomes, and they also don't have your skills, your abilities, your life, your situation. So you have to build a plan and a path and a goal that fits for you. You also have to have rewards that fit you and excite you. It's not about getting rewards to prove yourself to other people. It's about getting rewards to build your own confidence. So that's something I invite you to do, is to apply all of this ideas, all this research, the celebration, giving yourself a reward, powerful rewards for hitting various milestones. I have some rewards that I'm giving myself for hitting a certain milestone. Once I hit a certain amount of money in my retirement account, a certain number, a powerful number, I'm actually going to get myself a really cool car. It's not something that's like hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's not the kind of person I am, but it's something that personally excites me and motivates me. And I'm not doing it to prove myself to anyone. Don't even need to justify it, because wanting doesn't require justification. I don't need to hit my goal, and I don't need that reward. It's important to realize the big difference between wanting and needing. You don't need something. If you feel like you need something, then you have an unhealthy attachment to it. If you feel like you need something beyond yourself or beyond what you currently have, then you will never find happiness, because happiness is an inside game. So is confidence. And so you don't need your goal and you don't need your reward, but you can want them. And they are for your own enjoyment. They're for your own confidence. They're for your own symbols of moving your life forward and excitement and success. They have nothing to do with other people. So I invite you to set very powerful, high, hard targets. Give yourself a reward that's so compelling, so exciting, that it will motivate you to find new and interesting ways to help you get to your goal faster. That's what my own reward is helping me. By having this goal, it's motivating me to find new and interesting ways to make money to add to my retirement account. And that creativity and that action is really exciting. In psychology, there's an approach orientation and an avoid orientation. When you're on an approach orientation, meaning you're really clear on your goal and you're really approaching it you start to get really bold and creative, and you find new and innovative ways. That's what pathways thinking is all about. You find new and interesting pathways to achieving your goal and putting more and more resources towards that so that you experience the compound effect. And so by having that exciting goal, you will become an innovator in your own mind, and you'll be able to find and create new resources which would have never been there had you not had the goal in the first place. I'm finding and creating ways of making and investing money that wouldn't have been there had I not had that goal. So it's not actually taking away from my money, it's actually adding to my creativity, adding to my innovativeness. So set yourself a high, hard goal, give yourself a target, give yourself something that would stretch you, but once you hit it, it would be a massive milestone, and then give yourself a personally meaningful and exciting reward that's a huge symbol to you, but also that reward motivates you right now to find new and interesting ways to achieving your goal even faster. Once you hit that milestone, not only do you get the confidence of hitting that milestone, you also get the enjoyment of the reward, which is a symbol to you that you're making massive progress in your life. My name is Dr. Benjamin Hardy. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, please subscribe to this channel if you want more science-based research on becoming your desired future self. Also, down below is a link where you can get free access to my full 30-day Future Self course, which will help you become your desired future self faster. Have an amazing day.